Duval.
Oh, wow. Stealing a page from our own Jacqueline's Twitter here. This is the man that is going to wreak havoc in the AFC. Just one of the many coaching hires we saw.
Certainly, that's a way to start the era out in Jacksonville if you are Liam Cohen, and we welcome you into a delayed but not denied edition of HQ Spotlight. She's Katie Mox. I'm Haley Sutton, and as you mentioned, Katie, a lot of coaching to get into at this point. So let's take you back on a ride on that coaching carousel again, because as it stands right now, Katie, only one team left spinning. The Raiders, the Jets, the Cowboys, and the Jags all introducing the next era of their franchises. We got Shoddy out in Dallas. As Jerry Jones put it, quote, the biggest risk in his career. That makes me feel good as a Cowboys fan. Meanwhile, we just heard that egregious Duval call from Liam Cohen. He takes over after initially turning down the job. We've got Aaron Glenn having Jets Nation sing his praises. And then, of course, Pete Carroll is going to split his time between the field and the classroom this spring. He's wrapping up his class out there at USC. So all that's left standing is who the heck is going to coach the New Orleans Saints. Let's get you up to speed with our own NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. JJ, I got to be honest with you. We filled these other roles pretty quickly, but something about the Saints right now. They missed out on the Aaron Glenn sweepstakes. Joe Brady is backing out. Mike McCarthy is still floating around there somewhere. What can you tell us about the Saints' job to this point?
So the Saints have conducted 3 interviews, and really 4 interviews. They have Anthony Weaver with the Miami Dolphins, Mike Kafka with the New York Giants. They did those last week. Also, interim head coach, special teams coordinator Darren Rizzi, who we heard from Alvin Kamara via social media once they missed out on Aaron Glenn, saying, I wouldn't mind it if Riz was the head coach. But they met last night in Philadelphia with Eagles offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. I'm told by multiple sources that interview went quite well. You're talking about a guy in Kellen Moore who's been up for some head coaching jobs the last couple years, been denied a few times, but has really learned along the way. Remember, of course, he was at Boise State, so he was tutored under Chris Peterson, one of the best head football coaches at any level of ball. He learned from Dan Quinn when they were together with the Dallas Cowboys, of course, with Nick Sirianni now, who has gone to a second Super Bowl in just 4 years at the helm. So if you did not really believe in his bona fides maybe a couple of years ago, he has been able to grow and mature. And then lastly, you noted Mike McCarthy. I've been saying for a while now, there is no interview necessarily scheduled as far as I know from earlier today. Things may have changed over the last few hours, but Kellen Moore has been a target, certainly after they missed out on Aaron Glenn, missed out on Joe Brady. He could wind up being the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints, but just as a matter of bookkeeping, fact-checking, if you will, while he could agree to terms, nothing will become official until after the Eagles conclude their season. And so if they do agree at some point over the next week and a half, it will not become official until after Super Bowl 59, which coincidentally, of course, is being held in New Orleans.
It's so crazy how things come full circle and how everything it just comes together when it needs to. You mentioned Aaron Glenn. Obviously, the Saints were interested in hiring him. They were just a little too late because the Jets got to him first. And JJ, when you talk about first order of business for this guy, there's a lot to address when it comes to the Jets organization. But the biggest question is what's going to go on with Aaron Rodgers. We know his contract is coming up. They picked 7th overall, so maybe you trade up to get a QB. But either way, what are some of those conversations that they're having up in New York when it comes to what to do about Aaron Rodgers going forward?
So Aaron Glenn is not tipping his hand whatsoever about what he plans to do with Aaron Rodgers. He is under contract for the 2025 season, but it is not guaranteed. And yes, that cap charge is going to come due. They'll have to get all of that figured out. But Woody Johnson, he told coaches during the interviews, and he said publicly this past week, look, I'm not telling Aaron Glenn and new GM Darren Muji what to do at quarterback. I'm going to trust what they ultimately decide. Folks that I have talked to around the league have expressed a great amount of doubt that the Jets ultimately would bring back Aaron Rodgers. At the other side of 40, yes, he did play and perform better at the end of the year than he did at the beginning and middle portion of the season. But with Aaron Rodgers, of course, you get all of the other stuff that comes along with him. I'm not entirely sure that I have to explain that. The viewers at home certainly have been living the past 4+ years, and so they can understand that. Does Aaron Glenn, a first-time head coach in a media market like New York, does Darren Muji, a first-time GM in a media market like New York, want to deal with that? Or do you say, all right, even if Aaron Rodgers, between the white lines, gives us the best chance for victory for the 2025 Jets, is that ultimately what we want to do with the direction of the franchise? Again, I do believe that they are going to come to a consensus decision on this well before the start of free agency in mid-March. I don't know that anyone will be surprised if ultimately Aaron Rodgers is done in New York, but no sort of official word anywhere close to being determined just yet.
Yeah, when you look at the depth chart from last year, too, I'm looking at Tyrod Taylor, Adrian Martinez, and Jordan Travis as the backup options currently on the roster. So it'll be a lot to pay attention to going forward. Another quarterback question, though, JJ, that is looming out in Pittsburgh is what are they going to do about Russell Wilson? Of course, he was serviceable, I think, until he wasn't. We're now talking about Mike Tomlin potentially not being the head coach in Pittsburgh. So obviously there's a lot of conversation, when it comes to the Steelers. Do you stick with maybe a Justin Fields on the roster there? Or what direction do you think the Steelers will go with that same question?
So before they went on that 5-game losing streak to end the season, the Steelers and things coming out of there, it was, wow, would love to have both of them back. They know that they're not going to have both of them back. They probably knew that when they were saying that. The last 5 games of the season, 0-5. Russell Wilson averaged less than 200 yards passing. Now that Pete Carroll has come back to the NFL, is in Las Vegas, a team that needs a quarterback, a lot of folks are looking at Russell Wilson potentially going to Vegas, maybe pairing up with Pete Carroll and Darrell Bevell if he becomes the offensive coordinator in Las Vegas. Justin Fields obviously offers you potentially a higher ceiling, maybe a lower floor, but a cheaper option as well at quarterback for Pittsburgh, a group that they're going to bring back most of the coaches. And Arthur Smith, we know, loves to run the football. He probably gives you some better legs. There's no doubt about that. But again, those are decisions that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to have to make over the next couple of weeks, but at this point, not going to be much of a surprise to anyone if they see the Pittsburgh Steelers let Russell Wilson walk in free agency.
We'll have to see how it all shakes out. Turns out Mr. Unlimited has limits out there up in Pittsburgh. JJ keeping us updated with the latest coaching carousel, which continues to spin for just one team. Down there at the bottom, the New Orleans Saints, still looking for their guy to take over their program. As JJ mentioned, Kellen Moore, a big talking point there. We'll have to see how it all shakes out. Katie?